Hello and welcome to Nosebleed Sports. It's good to be back here. I'm Nation. Joined with me is the Test Monster.
How we doing, Zach? It's been a while.
It has been good to get back into the swing of things and enjoy just talking about sports here again. What have you been up to recently?
Well, just getting ready and geared up for another fun year of baseball season. Obviously, it's been about 3 years since we put anything out, and what better time to get back on the horse, as they say.
That's a good point. I also heard rumors that you were going to complete the 999 challenge this year at Target Field.
Well, that would be the first time. We've tried a couple times. I always seem to leave one of the nines out and never seem to quite get across the finish line.
This year's your year. I know I will not be completing it because those hot dogs really do a toll on me. But
That's
thinking about
really
some
weird for a wiener guy.
Appreciate that. It's almost as good as your comment starting on me looking like a Sonic the Hedgehog guy when we joined the show here too.
You look like Dr. Eggman.
People might start to think that we're friends with comments like that.
That's wildly inaccurate.
With baseball season coming up here, though, I know we wanted to jump into some of the spring starts that we saw from some of the exciting players. Is spring training stats going to carry over into the regular season? What to take away from some spring training things? I know one of the guys you wanted to touch on here was Clay Holmes. So why don't you just dive into what you saw from him in the spring training and kind of how that's going to carry over into the regular season?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what Clay Holmes can do this year. Obviously, everybody knows him as the longtime New York Yankees closer, but this year he was signed in the offseason by the New York Mets, who already came out and said right off the get go that they wanted to use him as a starting pitcher this year. Kind of caught me a little bit off guard, if I'm going to be honest, because, we saw him start to struggle in even one inning outings. What are you going to do when these guys see through the batting order more than once? But interestingly enough, he started to refine and work on his arsenal in the offseason. Notoriously, he's been hit around by lefties in his career. So what did he do? He added a couple new tools to his tool bag to try and address those problems. In addition to that sinker, who everybody knew that he threw, in addition to that slider, we're adding a cut fastball to keep the lefties off their guard, and adding a kick changeup, which seems to be all the rage this year, to his arsenal, as well as a put-away pitch against left-handed hitters. Kind of interesting to hear the kick changeup talked about as frequently as it is, taking baseball by storm, just like the sweeper did last year.
Yeah, I feel like we're at that point of if a pitch does a little bit different movement, maybe looking at half an inch run or a half an inch down, it becomes a new pitch. Do you see kind of all these new pitchers as the kick change, as the sweeper took storm last year, as an actual new pitch or something that is just a little variation that people maybe just refine a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting to see because it doesn't seem like a new pitch altogether, like we were classifying the sweeper as last year, but really it's a way for pitchers who throw in a certain way to actually get to that axis of spin that they could never get to before. So previously, we were saying that these guys who throw from a pronating position, they can't get to that inside axis to get that arm side run. So what they're doing instead is, to get to that supinating position, they're just getting their arm into a different orientation and able to actually get that touch on the ball to get it to run in that direction. And it seems like that's what guys like Clay Holmes or even Andres Munoz is the other one that we're hearing about pretty frequently this offseason, in addition to the guys that started coming out with it last year. So it'll be interesting to see if gains like this can stick. And obviously, we're seeing Clay Holmes trending in the right direction if the Mets are going to name him the opening day starter, which they did over a week ago already.
Yeah, that is something to think about on that side. And looking at pitchers that have new pitches coming in, I mean, we talked about the sweeper bringing some people to kind of that moderate pitcher level to elite or near elite starting pitchers, making it harder to hit. Is this something that you think he brings to his arsenal where being named the opening day starter, having the confidence from the team carries through the season, or do you see this as kind of riding a roller coaster in here?
I'm willing to admit that I don't have all the answers, which is a total deviation from my usual strategy. I'm not third person omniscient this year, so I don't know exactly how it's going to go. However, I think I've seen enough to believe. I think when we're looking at Clay Holmes, And I actually started thinking about it the other day. Not only have we seen a number of pitchers, go from starter to reliever and excel, we've seen a number of relievers go to starter and simply excel. I mean, everybody's already thinking of Michael King from last year, but it goes a little deeper than that. I mean, we saw Garrett Crochet debut as a reliever. Look at him now. He's the top 5 dynasty pitcher, depending on who you ask on any given day. Even Spencer Strider came up as a relief pitcher. So I think we're seeing the era where, we're not only seeing guys go to reliever and be able to, excel at an elite level, but we're seeing it go both ways, and guys who were previously thought of as the one inning guy succeeding long term. I think when we're looking at Clay Holmes specifically, obviously Michael King, when he made the transition full time last year, he had already had some starting experience. Now I don't know if we're going to see Clay Holmes throw 170 innings. However, I do think he can get to 150. I mean, that's 5 innings a start. He's doing that already in spring training. I don't think it's out of the question if he stays healthy. So if we can see, 150 innings of 3.5 ERA baseball, I think that's a huge win for the Mets, given that they're already missing a number of arms from that rotation, including Sean Manaea.
Yeah, and especially when you bring in somebody like a Juan Soto to sign in there and what their expectations are for this season, putting a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation on Clay Holmes. Definitely will be an interesting, at least first couple of months in there to see kind of how all of that shakes out. If he has the leash, you think he would with those injuries that you've talked about. But if you're looking for wins and you're looking for production and it's not there, how quick is that leash going to be before he ends up back into the bullpen?
It's fair.
And one of the players that we were touching on in this offseason and into last year that was disappointing was Bo Bichette. We've seen him come out of the gates this year with over a 350 average, being able to make up for his lackluster performance last year and the year before. Once a highly touted dynasty prospect, highly rated player in general, that has now fallen off the map looking at being drafted in that 200 range. What are your thoughts about his hot start? Does that give you more confidence in him bringing to get his game around? Or is that something where he's just a little flash in the pan here for these 20 games?
Well, I'll be honest, and I'm going to say this: question anybody who takes anything more than a grain of salt from spring training stats. That being said, anybody who's ever watched Bo and wonder what the hell happened has to be seeing this and liking what they're seeing at the very least. I mean, before last year, we're talking about a guy who was, a 300 average for his career, and now he comes out and hits 225. I mean, what the hell was that? We're also talking about a guy who, forever hit 20, 25, however many home runs. Yeah, it's an injury shortened season, but he hit 4 in 350 plate appearances. That's just absolutely absurd. I don't know. I mean, what kind of a rebound can we reasonably expect? I don't know. You're the Bo truther. You tell me.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you thought of Bo 3 years ago. Did you see him in his 2020 season being able to get better than that? I think with what the dynasty rankings were and how highly he shot up some of those boards, it was thought that he could get to kind of a 30-35 or 30-30 seasons on that side. In the spring training too, you do have him hitting 4 home runs in only 20 games. So when you look at kind of maybe a little resurgence of power, again, I'm on your side where take everything with spring training as a grain of salt. But when you do see a little bit of power coming back from him, you do see the contact back in there. It does lead me to think that maybe the injury-riddled season, he's healthy again and is able to recover into the 2020 area. I was never as high on him as the 30-30 seasons or the getting to being one of the possible top dynasty players on that side. But I do think he can rebound with his spring training independent into the middle of that shortstop pack as one of your starters that you can have in there, especially when you have a lot with Vlad, hopefully being signed long-term in there, getting some protection, runs, RBIs are always a little bit better when you're in a team that wants to sign and compete. So it will be interesting to see kind of how those first few weeks shake out. That could be one where you see a little bit of the yips that first couple of weeks go bad and kind of falling back, putting some more pressure on himself to get back to where he was on that side.
I've heard a lot of speculation that Bo might actually need to be traded to be productive. Are you in that camp?
I think when you look at it that way, sometimes the trade takes some pressure off somebody, knowing that a team wants him in there, knowing that he has the role to fill for them. I don't think it would be a bad thing for him on that side. I do see Usually those trades can be hit or miss. Again, it would depend on kind of what team he's traded to, what lineup he's in, where he's hitting in the order. But I do think having Vlad next to him in this, if he's able to hit at the top of the lineup this year instead of hitting at the bottom or not being able to be playable on that side, it's really going to come down to kind of that first month for him on how this season shakes out.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I guess if I really take a step back and look at it from a high level, you know, I don't know if I'm a believer that we see the stolen bases come back. I mean, even looking back, he's stolen 20 more than once, just once. And, the following year, he stole 13 after stealing 25 in 2021. So is it realistic to expect 20 steals? I don't know. Can we see 10? I think that's absolutely in the cards. So maybe, I think if he comes back to form, 30 home runs is absolutely in the cards, and he's never been to 30 home runs. So are we looking at a 30 home run, 10 steal profile? I think absolutely that's possible. And if we're talking about a player who can, potentially hit at a 300 clip with a 350 OBP, we're definitely talking about somebody who belongs in the top 10 at the shortstop position long term.
Yeah, I think that looking at that too, it depends on, as we talk about player rankings, really depends on the league you're playing in, the format, how valuable are those steals at the shortstop position. If you're in 5 categories for hitting, or if you're in 8, 9, 10 on that side where steals get watered down a little bit in the overall batting side, you could see him fluctuate in the rankings there too, with 10 steals being very mediocre for the position and for overall players, but not weighing him down as much once you add some more of those categories in there too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, all things in context, absolutely. When you're talking about having a full lineup around him, though, if you can get anything out of the steal category from some positions, that's a huge gain. If you're pairing him with somebody who's going to swipe 50 bags like an Ellie De La Cruz, you're going to be in good shape.
Yeah, and I look at stolen bases too. I think it would be really disappointing for all the Bo Bichette fans if Vladimir Guerrero Jr. there beats him out in steals this year too, with his moderate number of a handful of steals that you get from him from the first base position. I mean, he has eligibility in some leagues at third this year too. But when you're looking at it, and you're looking at a Vlad next to him that, carries around that dump truck behind him, that would be a shock to the system if he can't do that. And I do think it is reasonable to expect that Bo really doesn't steal any bases this year and just focuses on staying healthy too on that side, which would be kind of unfortunate for that category this year. But I think, again, looking at it, these first couple of weeks, this first month of the season will tell us a lot for kind of where Bo's going. Is he staying in Toronto? Is he headed out? Or is he making that kind of push for a career year after a couple of frustrating seasons?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
looking at that career year and thinking about what we want to watch for in the beginning of the season, I know one thing we've touched on was kind of Clay Holmes being over there. We touched on Juan Soto a little bit, and that's something I want to watch for in this first month of the season. There's been a lot of discussion about what his production is going to look like, hitting without Aaron Jones behind him. What do we have in that area of new lineup, new team, new ballpark dimensions? Kind of where do you see from him at the start of this year?
Yeah, I'll be fascinated to see what that lineup looks like, just because it's probably the best collection of bats that Juan Soto has ever hit with. I mean, yeah, you don't have Aaron Judge, but look who you do have. You've got Francisco Lindor, you've got Brandon Nimmo, you've got Pete Alonso, you've got Mark Vientos. I mean, top to bottom, this could easily be one of the best, not only lineups in the National League, but of the entire league as a whole. I mean, move over LA Dodgers because the New York Mets are coming to play. So when I think about Juan Soto in this lineup, we're talking about a guy who you can't pitch around him because you're going to have to pitch to the guys behind him. And if he's on base, the other guys are going to drive him in. And, if you're going to start pitching to him when the bases are empty now, then we're not talking about, a guy who's crippled by getting walked 150 times a year. I mean, I know that you're in that fantasy camp who has been hurt by that before. Look at all the years when he played with the Nationals and how you just got punished because all he could do in our 5x5 league is take a walk and pray to God that somebody could drive him in. So you got more than one category.
Yeah, I think this signing actually is encouraging to me going into that lineup. I know there's been a lot of talk about his home run production going down, moving away from Yankee Stadium. But when we were looking at the stats, there wasn't really too many home runs that just barely cleared the fence with him. I mean, he's a power hitter that can hit to all fields, especially when he's going to that left center field out there and has his full swing in there. I'm not too concerned about the power numbers going down. I am encouraged by possibly the runs and RBIs going up with having some more of those leadoff hitters in front of him, having the power behind him on that side, and just having more production throughout that whole lineup. So I'm looking for a huge year for Juan Soto. I know we've touched on in our discussions who's that number 3 player off the board this year in your redraft leagues, in your dynasty leagues. Kind of, you have especially one player, Shohei, locked in at that number 1 spot, Bobby Witt there at the number 2. And I think there's a good case to take Soto there at the number 3, even without getting that production in the steals category. Kind of, where do you see that play in for Juan Soto and where he gets drafted? And what are some other players that you're looking at there at number 3?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we broke it down off the air, there's a couple players that come to mind, but I think at the end of the day, it's how your league's broken up. I mean, if we're talking about a categories league, especially head to head or roto, you're looking to see how many categories can a guy contribute in. And no matter how you slice it, when you're talking about Shohei Ohtani and Bobby Witt Jr., you're talking about guys that are going to contribute in every category because they hit for average, they hit for power, they're on base all the time, they're stealing bases, they're driving guys in, they're scoring runs. I mean, no matter how you cut up your scoring format as a hitter, you're contributing to all of those categories. I think after those first 2 players, you start to see a few more warts in the profile, and that's where you can potentially consider more categories and players in that range. So beyond those 2, I think we broke it down and we decided there were probably 5 guys left on the board. We're not going to be talking about pitchers because they're second-class citizens in fantasy. We're talking about Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. These are going to be your guys who they hit a ton. They drive guys in. They score runs. They're on base. There's going to be questions about how often can they steal bases, and that's going to limit their upside in contrast to Bobby Witt and Shohei. The other players you're going to be talking about they're in that conversation, but they have red flags for one reason or another. You're looking at Elly De La Cruz, who, yeah, Elly is elite. He steals a ton of bases. He's got all the power in the world. How often can he get on base, and how does that impact your OBP, OPS, whatever that ratio that your league plays in? That's going to be a factor. We're talking about Corbin Carroll, who, yeah, he's been absolutely elite for, we'll call it 1.5 of his 2 seasons. Last year, he was absolutely dreadful to start the year. Even in Dynasty, I was wondering what the hell I was going to do with the guy in July. And then all of a sudden, he figured out his Rookie of the Year deal again. So I think Corbin Carroll's an elite play, but, is he Corbin Carroll, or is he a guy who's going to hit 200, strike out a ton, and you're going to wonder where the hell the power is? And then Jose Ramirez is Jose Ramirez. You know what I mean? He's going to be that guy until he's not. Do you want to be the one holding the bag the year he's not is the question. So Jose Ramirez is going into his, how old is he now, Zach?
I was going to say his age 36 season, 37.
Well, you'll be shocked to know that this is his age 32 season. So that's the real question is, when does the other shoe drop? I mean, last year he set a personal best in steals. He swiped 41 bags. He hit 39 home runs with an 872 OPS. That's absolutely elite. When does he stop stealing? When does the home run total drop? I think that's the ultimate question. Is it age 32? Is it age 52? I don't know.
Especially for him, I feel like they've been having that conversation for the last few years about when his stats are going to drop off, when he's not going to be stealing bags anymore. And again, like we looked at last year, just another almost 40-40 season from him in, again, a below average lineup on that side, but just being able to be productive across the board. And I think what you mentioned is important. Kind of, what is your league setup like? We've been touching on it a lot, where you give rankings, and I'd take this player over that player, but a lot of it, especially these days with how different leagues can be set up, a points league, a roto head-to-head, multi-categories, what categories are important on here. I think all of that's going to be your driving force. And then to think about it too, and we'll touch on a little bit of that later, is what players do you like at the end of the draft? What categories do you want to be chasing? Do you want to chase steals later? Do you want to chase on-base percentage? Are you looking for the guys that just hit some home runs and don't do much of anything else? Or do you have a couple of studs down there that you think can break out into kind of a 5-category performer as well? And so I think kind of looking at your whole draft process, players you like towards the end of the draft, and how you think kind of those mid to late rounds will shake out between like home runs and steals and on base percentage, especially getting overall unified approach to winning every category every week. I know some other sports, basketball mainly, being able to taint categories to just focus on winning maybe 7 to 9 categories, but that usually doesn't work out very well in baseball. Have you had any experience in that world?
Yeah, I'd say, the more you can get overall contributors, the better you are. The deeper you get, the tougher it gets to do those things. I mean, we're seeing a lot late in drafts. Yeah, okay. You're getting Juan Soto, with your first pick. You're going to have to make up steals somewhere, or do you just punt the category? I mean, there's that approach as well. It all kind of comes down to your risk tolerance and your overall strategy. I mean, are you going to be better served by, having let's say hypothetically you're in a 5x5. If you're really good in 4 of the 5 hitting categories, is that good enough, or do you want to try and sprinkle in some steals here and there to see if you can steal one a week or two, if you will? So I think there's a lot of different ways to slice that question, and it all comes down to especially in a redraft, are you feeling good enough about your other categories where you want to let it go, or do you have an opportunity to sprinkle that in late? Can you find a guy with 2020 capability late in the draft, even if you're taking a hit to your OBP? Those are the questions that you have to ask yourself. Personally, I always try and win at every category every week if I can. Obviously, we know that's not always in the cards. Inevitably, you're going to be playing a team that's got Ellie and Byron Buxton and Corbin Carroll all on the same roster in the same week, and where does that?
Yeah, and I think when you're looking at punting categories too, more applicable, let's use in redraft, where you're looking at it for 1 year and can be a little bit more precise or focused on that power category on that side. Where when you're looking in redraft, if somebody's power dips that you expected, maybe you're looking for a Bo Bichette the last 3 years to have 30 plus home runs, and now he's putting up 5. And instead of having that back fall to winning steals every week, now you're focused on kind of rebuilding your whole team from the ground up while you're losing kind of the other categories that you thought you were going to be able to win every week. I've tried it with relievers in the past and starters and tanking some of those pitching categories to go get more hitters. That did not work out very well for me, just as a fun fact. But I am on your same category of let's try to win every category, get those overall contributors. And it also just gives your team more flexibility in who you're adding and dropping every week. Kind of what streamers do you want coming through there as well.
Absolutely.
And kind of on that same topic, another one of those players I want to watch for on the top of the draft is going to be Julio Rodriguez. We've been, me personally, accustomed to his slow starts coming out of the gate for the past 2 years and then closing out red hot. This year, again, let's touch on spring training stats here. He is putting up some power numbers to start with. He does have his middle of the road average. Do you think that's something to carry over this year? Do you think he's more focused on the start of the year? Or is this somebody that you actually might want to fade a little bit at the beginning because a win in July is just as good as a win in August?
I mean, I don't know if I'm necessarily fading the slow start. I mean, we've heard that narrative a lot over the years about a lot of different players. We heard that forever about Luis Castillo, and it never stopped anybody from drafting him as a top 20 pitcher. So I don't know if that's necessarily the question. I think it's what are we seeing from Julio overall, and what is it doing to his overall profile? Yeah, last year was a little bit of a down year in the power department, but when you look at his season overall, he still produced at a similar rate in batting average and on base. I mean, his slugging percentage was down, almost a full 100 over his rookie of the year season, but overall, the numbers aren't that bad. I mean, last year his triple slash was 273, 325, 409. Overall, they're not, your favorite numbers for a guy that you're picking in the first 2, 3 rounds of your draft. But ultimately, it's not a guy who really punished you like Bo Bichette did last year. I mean, he still swiped 24 bags, so he was a 2020 player. I think there's absolutely, when we're talking about a guy who's going into his age 24 season, there's going to be more in the bag. I think it's a question of what you're getting this year. Even if he starts slow with, a 200 average out of the gate and 3 home runs in April, we absolutely saw him turn it on last year. It's just a question of how quickly he can get it going. And the power that we're seeing in spring training is a nice start to that. What do you think?
Yeah, that is something that is encouraging to me. Although, as we've said, we don't put a lot of stock into spring training numbers, but I would say it is a nice thing to see. That's not going to really influence my where I would draft him in a redraft or in a dynasty league, but being able to have some maybe some calming side effects on 4 or 5 home runs in uh, 17 games there. That's it. Getting out of his slow start right away in spring training, I'd be more concerned overall it's Julio just hitting at Seattle there with that ballpark for hitters in general. But hopefully they build a lineup around him. And I'm in the team where I think he's not going to start slow, but I'll keep holding him if I have to. I have no concern over having him on my team on that side. But when you're
No,
looking at players starting
I can't
slow,
imagine a 24-year-old stud is the one guy you're worried about on your team, especially on your dynasty roster.
yeah, especially looking at some of my rosters there with my outfield, that very little room for concern there. But it would be nice to see him pick it up and put a whole season together instead of some really good half seasons to really launch himself into kind of that conversation with Bobby Witt, kind of with what he did last year, and being in the same vein. I know we used to have the debate on Bobby Witt or Julio coming out as them as prospects, and really said kind of you're going to be happy either way. Bobby Witt owners a little bit happier right now, but it'd be nice to see the Julio camp go into kind of that same upper tier top level of the first round for the next few years as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that was one more thing in that world of kind of slow starts. And we've seen that in spring training with some of these closers giving up some runs in the first starts and actually getting called down or sent down to AAA or losing their closer role. I know the closer chaos here is something you wanted to talk about. So why don't you kickstart it with kind of what we've seen here and kind of what to expect in this first month or two of the regular season?
All right. Yes, I think when I was looking at it, I counted no fewer than 9 bullpens where I have no freaking clue what the hell's going on here. If we're going to start in the American League, Texas just this week unveiled their strategy for leverage situations where it looks like Luke Jackson is somehow in the mix, who absolutely nobody had even heard of since he, I don't know, pitched with the Braves 5 years ago. So now he's expected to be the favorite for saves over Chris Martin. That's an absolute shock. We're looking at the Detroit Tigers bullpen. They just optioned Jason Foley, who had been the apparent guy for saves. Now we're looking at a bullpen where, I don't know, 5, 6 guys might pick up 5 saves this year. Anybody from Bo Brisky, Will Vest, Tyler Holton, Tommy Canley, even Jason Foley whenever he comes back. That's an absolute question mark. Is anybody believing that Mike Clevenger is going to get 15 saves for the White Sox this year? And is it only because the White Sox are bad, or because they're going to trade him, or I have no idea what to expect there. Those are the ones I'm monitoring in the American League. The National League's got even more closer chaos. I mean, if we're going to start in alphabetical order here, the Arizona Diamondbacks, what are they going to do? They've got 3 guys who have picked up saves in the last 5 years. Justin Martinez, who had been presumed the guy who's had a little bit of a rough spring training. AJ Puck, who has been nothing but elite since he turned into a reliever. But are the Diamondbacks really going to use their only lefty leverage arm to end ball games, or are they going to use him when they need to bridge the 7th and 8th inning? Or is it ultimately going to be Kevin Ginkel whenever he comes back from the IL? I think that's a question mark. We already saw Alexis Diaz, who had been reported he was going to go to the minor leagues, and now he's hurt. I mean, can we take anything away from that? Is it going to be Scott Barlow, who nobody's thought about him since he was a Kansas City Royal? Twins fans will remember the name Taylor Rogers. Apparently he's in the ballpark for some saves now these days. Or is it going to be Graham Ashcraft? Is it really going to be that guy who, had a 6 ERA as a starter, who now all he wants to do is close out ball games? Oh yeah, and Alexis Diaz, whenever the hell he's back. Colorado. Okay, same thing as the White Sox. Do you really want anybody pitching in Colorado? Probably not. Even if you do, is it Victor Vodnik? Is it Tyler Kinley? Is it Seth Halverson? Or do you just want all 3 of them to combine for 20 fucking saves? There's that. You've got the chaos that you've got in Miami every year. I mean, Calvin Fauché, Jesus Tinoco, Anthony Bender, they've all been absolutely ass. Or you've got Andrew Nardi, whenever he comes back, he's on the 60-day IL. So you don't have a good answer there either. You've got Edwin Diaz, who's down like 4 or 5 ticks on his velocity. That's a big question mark. You've got David Bednar, who's got like a 15 ERA. You got Robert Suarez, who pitched on the backfields for, I don't know, 3 weeks. I mean, I think it's an easier question to ask. What bullpens do you trust at this point? And why are there only 5 relievers that seem to matter this year?
I was just thinking that as you're listing everything off, is this actually making some of those elite level relievers valuable in dynasty worlds, in redrafts for trades? We've always seen people move around so much. We see all the question marks everywhere. Is there actually a little bit more value coming to some of those elite guys?
I mean, I think it's fair to ask the question. When we're talking about dynasty, I'll be honest, it doesn't really matter. That's the first thing I'm looking to flip. It's like a running back in football leagues. Okay, well, I've got this asset. I have no idea how long it's going to be viable for. Get off my team. What else can I get? I think when we're talking about in redraft, it's fair to ask that question, but I think it's even more fair to ask, how do you know which guys are locked in? I mean, even when we're talking about Edwin Diaz, David Bednar, these are guys who, just 12 months ago looked about as locked in as it gets. Now we're talking about maybe 5 or 6 guys that are still left in that equation. Felix Bautista's coming off of an injury. You're really talking about like Emmanuel Clase, Mason Miller. You're talking about guys like that, and you're not even talking about this middle tier of guys who forever we leaned on because nobody wanted to take a closer that early in their draft. And now you've got a lot more value there. So how are we going to build our teams moving forward knowing that this could forever be a question? Or is it just a weird year? I have no idea. And I'd like to think I know more than a thing or two about bullpens. I have no idea what to make of this anymore.
I think as we've been touching on this first month, even the first week of the season, seeing if teams are in 2 or 3 save opportunities, are they running out the same pitcher? Do you immediately run to the waiver wire to pick some of those guys up? I think I just might this year with all of the question marks that are out there, with a couple of my guys getting optioned down or not being locked into that closer role anymore. Usually I like to sit there and wait towards the middle of the season, see what shakes out, see what's happening at the deadline. But this year it might be pertinent to get into that first week, the first 2 weeks of the season, and to take some more risks on who they run out there right away on that side. I think with all of the question marks, with all of the options for a lot of these teams that you've listed out, is it just the right strategy to take a stab at the first guy that gets a couple of saves? Or do you think, I mean, it's all up in the air, or is it going to be on a week to week basis on who they're giving saves on this side?
I mean, if we're talking about taking stabs, I think it kind of matters what team we're talking about. If the Tigers throw somebody out there and it's a different guy every day of the week, depending on, AJ Hinch's level of dissatisfaction with the guy who threw the night before, I don't know if I'm going to put a lot of stock in that. If we're talking about, the Diamondbacks, and I see Justin Martinez appear for the first 3 save opportunities, I might be willing to lend a little bit of credit there. So I think it depends on who we're talking about, what we know about the manager, etc. I'm willing to give some teams a little bit more credence in their ability to do the same thing in a repeatable or guessably repeatable fashion, but I think other teams are just they love the chaos, and the Tigers seem to be one of those. I mean, you saw that playoff battle that they had last year with Cleveland. I mean, they threw out a different guy for a different inning for every game, and it seemed like Tarek Skubal was the only one you could reliably guess to throw more than an inning. So I don't know that I'm going to trust anything the Tigers do. I mean, we just saw them. Apparently, Spencer Torkelson's back, and they're not even sure if they're going to play him. So I don't know what to do with them. I know it's a really roundabout way to answer your question. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'll find myself taking some more stabs early this year then, and especially because you don't have a settled one down there. If you have 3 closers on your team and you're comfortable at that point, maybe you can wait a little bit to pick up a fourth one, again, depending on your league settings. Or if you've got a couple locked in at the top, go take those risks at the bat side. But I think for most of my leagues this year, I'm trying to take that stab early, trying to get a guy that can lock down some of these question marks in those bullpens at the beginning of the season, hopefully ride them out to 20, 30 saves from them on that side when you're thinking about upside of players you pick up early in the season. Usually to me, I'm looking at kind of those starting pitchers that start off hot, and this year especially, a closer that can hopefully lock down a role and return some value from you from that free agent wire.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that vein, I know we've both identified a number of players that we kind of wanted to plant a flag in this year for one reason or another, whether it be in a positive or negative direction. Do you want me to kick this off, or do you have somebody you're thinking about?
No, go for it right away. Who's that number one flag plant for you this year?
Well, I'm probably going to be the ire of many people, and many Twins fans are going to probably disagree with this take. When we're looking at pitchers, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little horny for Chris Paddock this year. What do you think about that?
That doesn't seem like you from that statement. Where and why is this coming up for Paddock this year?
Well, Paddock has been an interesting one. I mean, he's been here in the Twin Cities now. This, I think, his third or fourth. This is going to be his fourth year in Minnesota. To date, he has appeared in. I'm going to count here. 24 games. He's appeared in 24 games. He started 17 games last year with a 5 ERA. Not exactly stats that are going to win you a fantasy league. However, I've been watching him pretty closely this spring. Let me give you some numbers from his last two outings. This is March 20th against Boston. He threw, his fastball was sitting at 95, and he had a 41% whiff rate on the pitch. Stuff Plus graded it out as 100, or at least league average, which is impressive for a guy who hasn't impressed a lot of people for a while. But it gets better than that. His changeup was graded out at 135 on Stuff Plus with a 57% whiff rate. He threw it 20% of the time. His slider, he threw 16.7% of the time at 84 miles an hour, graded out at 113 on Stuff Plus. He didn't register any whiffs with the pitch, but it's looking better. His curveball was the lowest graded pitch by Stuff Plus. It graded out at 90 at 79 miles an hour. Then we're going to look at his start just yesterday, March 25th. Okay, I get it. It's the Colorado Rockies. But numbers are numbers. Data is data. It's trending in the right direction. Again, he sat 95. 48% of his pitches were the fastball. He registered a 39% whiff rate on the fastball yesterday. His slider and changeup both sat around 85 again, and both graded out. The slider was at 115 on Stuff Plus with a 50% whiff rate. The changeup was again over 130, 131 with a 38% whiff rate. I'm not saying he's going to be a league winner this year. However, if we're looking at guys with upside at the back of your draft, I don't think the Twins are going to be the favorite to win the AL Central, but it's a bad enough division. They're going to play bad enough teams where he can pick up some wins. And if he's generating whiff rates that he hasn't in years, I mean, we look back at his last 6 seasons, his average K per 9 has sat around 8, which is exactly where it was last year. However, this is a guy who's historically had great command. I mean, we're looking at, over the course of his career, 1.9 walks per 9. So if we can see that K rate tick up and have some command still there, I think we're looking at the upside of a guy who can post a whip closer to 1. And if we've got an ERA around 4, we've got the makings of a nice upside at the back of your draft.
Yeah, those are some good spring training stats in there.
Thank you.
We'll have to see kind of what that carries over to in the regular season on that side. I can't say that I'm fully bought in on it, but stats are stats. Numbers don't lie. And the player that I want to look at first
sounds like you want to make a shot bet.
Is a shot bet for Chris Paddock?
Yeah.
What's your line here?
I don't know if I feel real confident that he's going to throw more than 130 innings given his injury history, but let's call it 130 innings of 4 ERA.
I'll take that.
All right.
The shot bet list. Put that on the board.
Put it on the board.
First shot bet officially in the books this year. As we head over to the first player I want to look at, which I think has some of that upside, and that's going to be Lane Thomas. And I think him coming off the board towards the back end of your draft again with the steals and home runs upside, going over to Cleveland, getting to hit around and Jose Ramirez there. He's shown flashes. He's shown elite home run and speed steals in stretches. But if this is the year he can put it all together, you're now getting a guy that's going off the board maybe at round 18 or later in some leagues. that thing getting you round 11, round 10, round 8 upside if he's coming in there for 25-25? What do you think about that?
I've got some questions here, and I'll sum them up before I throw it back to you because I don't want to catch you off guard here. When I think about Lane Thomas, I think of what I've heard for years is that he's a platoon specialist. He's a weak side platoon guy who you throw out there against lefties and he can absolutely mash. If he's against righties, you're hoping he gets on base enough to steal. I think that's the first thing that comes to mind. And then I also wonder if you have a take on, obviously we're looking at a Cleveland system that is fairly stocked in minor league talent, specifically thinking of their upper minors and the prospects that are there. Are you at all concerned about somebody coming up and taking the job from him where he might be more limited in a games played situation, nerfing all of his counting stats, and you're left holding the bag for somebody you're going to be cutting to the waiver wire?
Yeah, I mean, I can see where you are. I mean, that's why he's being drafted at the end of your drafts anyway, is because you do have those questions that are built in there. But when you're looking at the upside, if he does get on base a touch higher against righties there, he does continue to show some power. He's going to steal some bases when he gets on. Maybe being able to get some more RBIs and runs scored there in Cleveland, coming over at the trade deadline last year. The upside there, again, when you're looking at filling out your roster, being able to get a guy that can go into that 2020 range, even in limited success. Again, if he's mashing against kind of those lefties on there, being able to even platoon him on your team where you know he's going to mash there and you get to sit him some other days with your bench prospects there and play the matchups for you isn't a bad situation either when you're drafting there, again, towards the end of your draft. When you're looking at kind of the prospects coming up, I think you'd be at that point too of, hey, Lane Thomas didn't pan out. He's one of my last round draft picks. I'm easy to cut the bait with him and move on. But when you're looking for a guy that can deliver that 10th, 9th, 8th round value at the end of your draft, those are kind of the guys that can end up carrying your team and being a stalwart in there. So when I'm looking for upside, I think he's got the makings of being able to do it, and we'll see kind of what happens when he is able to put it on the table this year.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too when you look at his Savant page. It's all over the board in terms of red and blue. When we're talking about the red categories, I don't think it's any shocker. The guy's fast. 93rd percentile in sprint speed. Interestingly, he's got a pretty good glove, pretty good arm, but terrible range. So I don't know what to make of that in terms of how safe he is as an outfielder. But his chase rate's low. He squares up balls, but he also has a above average K rate, which is interesting. Not chasing, but still can't really make great contact. He's all over the board. I think when we're talking about upside at the back of the draft, like you're talking about, absolutely, there's something to be said for that. And we're talking about a guy who just in 2023, for the record, had 28 home runs and 20 steals. So if you can find that in the last rounds of your draft, absolutely. And it, obviously we've been tracking throughout the offseason. Chase DeLauder is going to miss several weeks, their top outfield prospect. So I don't know if it's quite as inevitable as it seemed to be when we started spring training. So he might get some extended runway here. It's just a matter of how quickly can he take off and how safe is that playing time.
Yep, completely agree. And I'd say I do have him on a couple of my teams, so excited to see that potential breakout on that side and kind of hopefully carry some of those stolen bases and be able to get some power in there this year. I know there's another guy that was on your list that you're pretty high that you wanted to talk about. Who else do you want to point out here?
I'm really excited about this guy, and actually, I found out off the air that you just picked this guy up in another league as well. We're talking about former 2021 National League Rookie of the Year, Mr. Jonathan India. Just moved this offseason from the Reds to the Royals in a swap for Brady Singer. What do you think? What are your initial reactions of seeing Mr. Jonathan India as a potential plant your flag player?
It makes me happy that you think that somebody I traded for is going to do good this year. That's usually an outlier on that side. So take that for what you will. But I think the move over, kind of as we touched on with Bo Bichette, getting a fresh start at the team, somebody that can steal bases, has a little bit of pop to him too. Being a part of a better hitting rotation there around Bobby Witt. People aren't afraid to steal bases over there too, so that might jump those numbers up even more. That is an interesting one, I think. I think there's, again, the upsides there, but you have the last couple of years of below average performance on there. What do you take and why do you think he turns it around?
Well, here's what I'm looking at here. I think when you're talking about being moved from Cincinnati, who their infield is absolutely stacked. When you think about Matt McClain coming back, you got Ellie De La Cruz, Jamer Candelario, Christian Encarnacion Strand, Spencer Steer. The guy's not getting any playing time. However, it's been talked about quite extensively this offseason. The Royals actually want to play him in the outfield anyway. So now we're talking about a guy who might have multi-position eligibility. That's fascinating to me. We're talking about a guy who is probably going to hit in front of Bobby Witt Jr. just based on his profile. We're talking about a guy who was just the Rookie of the Year 4 seasons ago. He is among the league leaders in chase percentage, 98th percentile there. Doesn't swing and miss, 81st percentile there. Walks at an elite clip, 97th percentile there. A strikeout rate, he's 64th percentile at less than 20%. So he's above average across the board in strikeouts, Ks. We're talking about a guy who's got some speed, base running value, 76th percentile, sprint speed, 68th percentile. Kansas City, as you just talked about, they run more than anybody in the league. I don't think it's a question of if he can exceed his previous high of, let's see, 14 steals. I think 20 is a slam dunk for him if he's playing 150 games. So now we're talking about multi-position eligibility, elite in K rate, elite in walk rate. That sounds like a slam dunk to me in your points leagues. Now we're talking about hitting in front of Bobby Witt Jr. That's elite run scoring ability, elite on base percentage ability. We're talking about a guy who has hit 20 home runs before. He's never hit fewer than 10. So we're looking at 10 to 20 home runs. That's going to be good for something. Hitting on top of that lineup, you're probably not going to get a lot of RBIs. Am I willing to settle for that? I think I am. I think it's a question of how good can he be in the other four categories that you're willing to take a little bit of a pay cut in RBIs. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me on that side. Obviously, that's why I traded for him here in the offseason, thinking
Obviously.
he could have some upside in here, but also having a nice floor in a multi-category at league as well. So I think he ends up rounding out a lot of rosters pretty nice, giving you a little bit of everything, kind of as you've mentioned, with a pretty, not going to say wildly safe floor, but a pretty decent floor for what we've seen him doing over the course of the last few seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're talking about a guy with an ADP of about 250, we're talking about a 20th round pick. This is a throwaway pick. I mean, as far as those picks go, I think this is a slam dunk and it's about as safe as it gets.
Yeah, I'd say when we're looking at your 25th round there, it's hard to look at a pick on there and say that's a bad pick if you're envisioning some kind of upside and something you can cut bait with pretty easy when you don't have too much invested, both in redraft and again when you're looking in the dynasty world, being able to kind of hit that upside for multiple years, definitely worth the worst risk there.
Absolutely. Well, I know I have one more flag to plant. Do you have any more on your end?
Not necessarily flags to plant, but a couple of players that I was interested in this year. And I'm just going to touch on them briefly before we go to your last flag, and that's going to be Jake Berger heading over to Texas and Reese Hoskins coming with a bounce back season. Both kind of the same profile player in there of we're not looking for the 5 category tools on this side. But with how well Jake Berger performed at the end of last year, with no lineup around him, getting to move over to Texas. I know his average draft value has risen since then on that side, but it is someone that I'm interested to see if it was just there's no pressure in Miami. I can just swing away, and now getting a little bit more pressure. If he rises up to that, I mean, you could be looking at a 30, 35, 40 home run guy with a lot of runs and RBIs around him on that side. So when you're looking again at both of these at the last rounds, Jake, again, going to be in the middle of your draft, but Reese towards the end of it too. Coming back from injuries, having some upside there, again, as a late round flyer, being in the middle of that Milwaukee lineup there that has some upside, has some hitters in it. Both players that are intriguing to me that I'm maybe not quite as planting my flag, but interested to see, and I've been intrigued with them in their draft and where you can get them to round out some of your rosters and aim for some of that upside there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about guys who, Berger as recently as last year, obviously, was shown the flashes with the power with the bat. The question was never, whether or not he had the power. It was, for a long time, it was can he cut the K rate and can he be in a situation where the power actually comes into play where he's picking up some RBIs. I think, especially when we're talking about head-to-head categories, I'm not really worried about that K rate, even though I'd love for him to be on base more, especially in a better Texas lineup. He can absolutely flirt with that 100 RBI threshold when we're talking about a lineup that's stocked with Semien, Seager, Adolis Garcia. I don't think it's a question of whether he has the potential to get there. I think it's, where does he hit in the lineup and how often can guys be on base in front of him? When we're looking at Rhys Hoskins, I think the real question is, can he stay healthy? I mean, I don't think Milwaukee really has a glut of options at first base. I mean, they've got a lot of guys who they trotted out there at the position, but none of them have really put the Brewers in a position where they need to get Hoskins off the roster to give them time. So I think there's absolutely upside. It's, can Rhys Hoskins, come back to even a glimmer of the form that he had with the Phillies? And you're talking about, potential league winning upside in a 30 home run bat. In a lineup where you potentially have a fully healthy Christian Yelich for the first time in years.
Yeah, that's what I liked about both of them. Again, you're not really looking for the full 5 categories or 7, 8, 9, however many categories you're looking at hitting there. But when you're trying to round out your roster, if you're pairing one of them with some of the steal specialists at the end of the draft, it is somebody that, or both of them are intriguing to me to be able to round out that roster. And still, again, in the draft shooting for upside. On that side. So who was the last guy that you wanted to mention here to get your flag into?
Well, I'll be honest, I'm a little apprehensive even saying this one, given the number of question marks we've already put on other bullpens out there. However, I think when we think about this one's about as easy as it gets. I think Ryan Helsley is being overdrafted at his ADP, and I think there's a couple of reasons why. I don't think it's a question of if he's one of the best relief arms in the game. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was absolutely elite last year. He had a 1.1 WHIP, which was a little high, but for the number of innings he threw, he struck out as much as anybody. He's got a low ERA, and he picked up almost 50 saves. I think I have questions here because here's the deal. This is the first time he's ever picked up 20 saves or more in a season, and he blew that out of the water. However, the St. Louis Cardinals are unquestionably a worse team than they were last year. Can he be provided with as many opportunities to pick up a save? I think that's a question mark. Ryan Helsley is in a contract year. If he is traded, which I don't think is a question of if, it's when. Cardinals have already shopped him in the offseason. I don't think it's a question of if he gets moved, it's how quickly into the year does he get moved? Does he get moved to a contender? Or does he get moved to a team that already has an established closer? If we're seeing Ryan Helsley go to a team like the Yankees, who has already acquired a Devin Williams, is Ryan Helsley even in the conversation for saves? Or is he a highest leveraged reliever where he's just getting the 3 toughest outs to get, regardless of where they come in a ball game? I think Ryan Helsley is absolutely a guy I want on my team, and I have him in a couple of spots. I just question of what is his ultimate upside this year, given that he's in a contract year, given that he's on one of the bottom 10 teams in the league in terms of context coming into the year, and knowing what he did last year. I'm not willing to pay for last year's 50 saves that early in my draft, knowing full well his probable upside this year might be 30.
Yeah, with all the question marks we've already talked about, obviously you know where we stand on relief pitching and how just a couple of bad months or one bad month, a couple of bad weeks could get you out of that role to start with. I do like the point that he's in the contract year. You do see a lot of those closers get shopped to then go be set up or to get the tough 3 outs in that side of it. So I do like the flag in a relief pitcher in general that's being drafted high. Those are obviously the most volatile on there. But when you add in kind of the trade possibilities coming from a bad team, seems like a no-brainer kind of where he's getting drafted now too on that side. So I'm with you on that one as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of questions out there around bullpens. I don't have a lot of questions around established relievers like this. And that's why I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, that kind of mirrors the discussion of wanting those established relievers that we were discussing and also fading some of them too. It's just not a locked in. Got to think of the whole context on that side of it. So good information there. And that'll round out kind of everything we wanted to touch on here. So thank you for joining us here at Test Monster. You got any last words?
No, it's good to be back. Good to be, chatting about this on the air again. Couldn't be happier to be back on the air with you. It's nice to be here in the nosebleeds. I know we had a lot of fun in the locker room. The nosebleeds are where we belong.
Yeah, get back out there watching baseball. Excited for this season to start. And we'll be back here coming up shortly with kind of how the season started and where to go. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all for joining us.